In this episode, we cover why the financial goals you set for this year won't work. Let's get started.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, it's the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. Negotiating compensation, purchasing your first investment property, helping your family with money, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. New money brings new problems that require new solutions. Join us as we work through them together. I'm Brenton Harrison, and this is the New Money, New Problems podcast. Hello, and welcome to another week of New Money, New Problems podcast. Hope that you enjoyed our conversation last week with Rakim Sabri, author of Overcoming Financial Trauma. I shared in that episode that I have read the book, highly recommend the book, because I think it does a great job of not just giving you information on how to move forward financially, but it also forces you to reckon with what you brought to the table. What are my financial behaviors, fears, concerns, inclinations that might make it hard for me to progress financially? I think it's along the same lines or the same theme of today's episode, which we set way back months ago. We said we're going to, at the end of January, talk about financial goals that don't stick and why. This is actually coming off of an episode we did a few years back on how to set financial goals that stick, which we'll link to in the show notes. But, late January, early February, whether it's financial goal, fitness goal, nutritional goal, it's just the time of year when those New Year's resolutions can fail. So I want to give you the elements of the goals I hear people set that don't stick and why. And we're going to start with a lack of reward. And in each of these categories, I'm going to give you what I think are some real life experiences that translate into the financial world. When it comes to not having a reward for a financial goal, I'm really talking about not having an early release of dopamine. As my cousin George, who is a therapist, says, when you set a goal, you want to give yourself the opportunity to have an early win or to see some progress. And it made me think of when we were teaching our son how to use the potty. When we were potty training him, it took us 3 attempts. We literally tried it, wasn't working, stopped, tried it, wasn't working, stopped. And then my wife told me about this book that she saw on Instagram called How to Potty Train a Child in 3 Days. And it really wasn't, magic. It was literally just pay attention to when your child is giving you that face that they're going to go to the bathroom. It is highly likely that your child goes to the bathroom in the same place of the house when they go to the bathroom. So you need to just find 3 days where you can take the Pampers off, and anytime you see them going over to that part of the house, you take them to the potty. Anytime you see them giving you that face, you take them to the potty. And there's going to be some accidents in these 3 days, but every time they get to the potty, once they use the potty, you congratulate them, you tell them this is where we go to the potty, and you give them a reward. I know this sounds a lot like training a dog, but hey, the book worked. And on the third try, on the third day, he was potty trained. When it comes to financial behaviors, there is often going to be the same way that you mess up every single time. Or you follow that behavior well for a certain period of time and you mess up around the same period of time. So whenever someone sets a financial goal, I try to encourage them to have some release or some celebration or some goal that has a very quick experience where they can have a win. I'll give you an example. We have people who want to pay down debt. They have credit card debt. They've reached a point in their life where they want to take it very seriously. Now, there's 1,000 ways to pay down credit card debt. We did a video on 3 ways that I think are the most effective, which we'll also link to in the show notes. But one of the more common is to do either the avalanche method or the snowball method with things like credit cards. The avalanche method says if I have 3 credit cards, I'm going to figure out which credit card is charging me the most interest on a monthly basis, and I'm going to throw whatever extra money I have each month towards the card that has the highest interest rate because it's the card that's costing me the most money. Conversely, the snowball method says instead of focusing on the card that's costing me the most money, I'm going to focus on the card that has the lowest balance. That's my preferred method because unless you're the most disciplined person on earth, the avalanche method can take a much longer time to pay off the first card. It makes sense because it's costing you the most amount of money. But the snowball method gives you the reward the fastest, and giving yourself that pat on the back of the reward of saying, I had 3 credit cards, now I have 2, can be enough to take you beyond motivation and have that behavior exist long enough to actually become a habit. And this lesson isn't just true for the amount of money that goes towards things, it's actually even true for the way that you monitor your money, either individually or with a couple. If you're deciding that you want to have these conversations with a spouse, who likes sitting down on a monthly basis and having a conversation about who spent what and what your balances are with their spouse? It's not a fun thing to do. But if there's something that you enjoy doing together, and that could be a lot of things if you understand what I'm saying, then maybe that's something that you pair with the experience so that it's something that both of you hopefully look forward to. And if it's not something you both look forward to, you got to find another thing. But you want to be able to give yourself a quick win. Next up, your goal isn't automated and it depends too much on human discipline. All I will say is if you think you are the most disciplined person in the world, every person's discipline can fail when life gets busy. So if you tell yourself that you're going to increase the amount that you're investing, but you have to leave it up to your own discipline and motivation to do so, you're not going to do it as consistently as you could have if you just set an automatic contribution from your checking account to your investment account. Not only that, even if you are as consistent, it will make it much harder in terms of how it feels than the process of automation. Because as I've shared, the brain has a magical ability to get used to things that happen in the background. With investing, it's not just automatic contributions, which are powerful. It's also automatic increases like you find in your company 401k, where instead of saying I'm just contributing 3% or 5% of my pay, you say I'm going to contribute 5% of my pay towards my 401k, and I'm going to set it so that every single year it automatically increases that contribution rate by 1% until it reaches a cap of say 10 or 12%. Those are things that, especially as your income increases, you can take advantage of automation. You can take advantage of the power of the mind's ability to forget things and get used to things and use all of these behaviors and characteristics to your favor. The next reason your financial goals fail is because they ignore other parts of your finances. I am hoping that there are some phrases, if you listen regularly, that you just know I say by now, right? Like that's Brenton's thing. Like, I didn't create the juice isn't worth the squeeze, but I say it enough that it should be like partially mine. But another thing that should be partially mine, and I don't hear a lot of people saying it, is that finances don't operate in a vacuum. Anything that you do in one area of your finances, it affects at least one other area of your finances. And this is something that you see all the time when people set goals that don't take into consideration the balance of your finances. And it's well intentioned. I would say the most consistent goal that I see people set is to decrease debt. And when you look at things in a vacuum, there's typically one debt that bothers people more than others. It's often credit card debt as an example. So let's say we have a person who has a $10,000 balance on their credit cards, and they look at that $10,000 and they say, I've had this credit card debt for years and years and years. It's a $300 minimum payment. I just want it gone. Now, this same person has a car, and that car has $7,000 left on it, and it's costing them $500 a month. Now, not only would it cost less money to pay off the car, it would actually save them more moving forward because now they have $500 extra in their budget as compared to the $300 minimum payment from the credit card. But like I said, this person is not as stressed out by the car payment because they say everybody has to have a car. They're much more stressed out by the credit card debt, and they're motivated, which is a good thing. But if you're looking at things and saying this doesn't happen in a vacuum, I would say you can actually make it easier to have no debt at all by putting extra payments towards your car payment. And not only do you free up more on your budget in total, you also can now more aggressively attack the credit card debt and knock off both much faster than if you did it in reverse. It's actually another form of the snowball method versus the avalanche method. Another huge example that I see is people who are motivated to increase college funding for their child or retirement funds for themselves without looking at the balance of their assets. This is something when you talk about college planning that has led to people saying that I'm anti-529, which I'm not anti-529 accounts. I am anti someone taking a significant amount of money and putting it into an account that has to be used for education before they can show that they've met metrics for their own finances. Because I can assure you, the better off you are financially by the time your child gets to college, the better off your child will be in terms of your ability to support them. But when I see people who are motivated and they say, I don't want my child to have to go through what I went through, I'm going to start putting $200 a month into their 529 or $100 a month into their 529, and they're saving nothing for themselves. They're on a quick path to their child getting to school, not having enough in the 529, also not having enough in their other investments accounts, and now every goal has to be sacrificed. Your child has to take out loans, or you have to cash flow it, meaning you can't put aside money in your own retirement, which increases the likelihood that when you get to retirement age, you have to depend on your child, and no one is better off by that type of decision making. And there's an add-on, an addendum to this one where I say it doesn't take into consideration the other parts of your finances that I'm going to blend into the next one. And that is, you do things financially that cause problems in other areas of your finances. And that is something like, for example, you might have someone who earns really good income. Let's say as a household, it's $300,000, and they are motivated to start investing. And they don't just want to invest, they want to pick their own investments. They've been reading up on stocks and bonds, and they don't need any index funds. They need to build their portfolio themselves because they're taking charge of their finances. So they start day trading, or they buy some stocks and they start trading them when they feel it's a good time to trade them. They're doing all types of transactions where they're buying and selling these stocks, and maybe they're not even keeping them for a year, unaware of the fact that at that income level, they're not just paying ordinary income tax, they're also paying an additional 3.8% net investment income tax. I've seen scenarios where someone will read about the term tax loss harvesting, where you will sell a stock at an intentional loss to take advantage of the tax loss that comes with it. And then the next week they'll buy, if not the same company, a company that's basically the same, unaware of something called the wash sale rule, which essentially says when you sell a stock intentionally for a loss, and then within a certain period of time, you buy basically the same stock, that loss from a tax perspective is disallowed. So this person sold intentionally at a loss, bought the same company, and can't even use the loss that they tried to generate, all because this is not only a part of setting a goal that doesn't take into consideration the rest of your finances, it also bleeds into the next problem, which is setting goals when you don't know what you're doing. I would argue that a little bit of knowledge about something without the proper context is one of the most dangerous things in society. And nowhere is that more true than someone who has a little bit of investment knowledge, or thinks they have a little bit of investment knowledge and a little bit of tax knowledge. And these overly confident people will often take specific actions financially without the experience or foundation to supplement the decisions that they're making. An example would be the person who has never invested in non-qualified investments before and goes straight to single stocks instead of investing in something like an index fund, which is more diversified, in most cases has less tax consequences, and is something that you don't have to be a genius to understand. It's the person who reads a book about permanent life insurance and self-banking concepts, and all of a sudden they find themselves paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month on some whole life policy or index universal life policy with terminology that they do not understand, that has a time horizon that they wildly misinterpreted, and now they're wondering why 3 years into the policy, they only have 30% of what they put in when they thought they would be able to immediately use it for its tax benefits. Again, something that may be appropriate, but only if positioned appropriately with the help of somebody who knows what they're doing, or by you implementing it after you know what you're doing. So in setting financial goals, having some humility about what you're able to accomplish and where you need help is crucial.
This is the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. We'll be right back.
Are you wondering what new money problems you might be overlooking in your financial life? If so, we've got great news. We've crafted the New Money, New Problems Gap Finder to identify potential weaknesses in your finances in areas ranging from budgeting, investments, insurance, and even the threat your extended family's finances could pose to your household. please head to newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to complete it today. Again, that's newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to take the assessment.
You're listening to the New Money, New Problems podcast. Subscribe now at newmoneynewproblems.com. Welcome back.
The next type of financial goals that don't stick are the financial goals that don't have buy-in. And now we're starting to get either to your individual buy-in or more likely the collective buy-in that comes with attacking financial goals when you have a partner or a spouse, which is very difficult to do. I feel like I've been fairly transparent about the shortcomings that I have had in trying to get on the same page financially with my wife. And as I've gotten older, at least having a little bit more awareness of the fact that like I'm part of the problem here, right? Like I have some frustration that I'm, directing towards my spouse when in reality, either the way that I try to communicate it or the fact that I didn't communicate it has done harm. We're going to have a guest on the podcast in a few weeks, Julian and Kirsten Saunders of Rich and Regular. And they wrote a book called Cashing Out. And in that book, they talk about how we often label each other when it comes to finances. Like one person will be labeled the spender versus one being labeled as the saver. And not only does that shortchange the person who's the spender, right? It stigmatizes them, it shames them, but it's also not true. Like at some point, we all spend money on some things. And what is easier to do is to blame or assign a label to a person. What is harder to do is to try to get on the same page about the things that you are going to spend on. The easier thing to do is to set a goal, and when you don't hit that goal, be very frustrated that your spouse didn't do their part to help you meet the goal that you set. What is harder to do is to have some type of back and forth or middle ground about the goals that you're pursuing and make sure they're in alignment. When we do our goals questionnaire with New Money, New Problems, which we'll put a link to in the show notes, there are goals that we'll have people go through as a couple. And I will intentionally try to guide them as little as possible. And I want both of them to write down their goal, right? At the beginning, I want them to say, this is what I want to do. It's the financial behavior I want to start, stop, or do more of. Or this is what I want to do in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or more. And by getting both answers, we will see some very common examples of misalignment. I have seen couples where they will sit and one of them will say, I want to take more vacations and I want to set aside money for those vacations so that we're not spending on credit. That's a very valuable and viable goal and a realistic goal, right? Like who doesn't want to plan ahead a little better? Their spouse will sit there and for that same period or that same behavior, they'll say, I want to aggressively pay down our debt. Well, those may be two things that are misaligned. If you're going into the year and one person in their relationship is trying to set up a vacation fund and the other is trying to put every spare dollar towards debt, that's a little bit of misalignment. When it comes to motivation, there are people out there who want to retire early. They're motivated to retire early. They're committed to retiring early. They put extra in their 401k. They deprive themselves in the here and now so they could benefit in the hereafter. Not like, the metaphysical hereafter, but just hereafter of your working years. But they might be married to a person who says, I want to have more date nights. And I'm not trying to spend on credit on those date nights, but I want to find some ways to do this more consistently. That's misalignment. Now, it doesn't have to stay that way. It could be that you come to a middle ground of how much extra goes towards debt when you have lump sums of cash and how much goes towards things like the vacation fund. It could be that you have more date nights, but you find a way to do so in a way that saves money compared to the way that you used to do your date nights. But just making sure that you can find a way where you understand what's important to the other person and you're making sure that it aligns with your financial behavior is a much better experience and stickier experience in terms of setting behaviors that work than just having a goal that's not aligned or not communicated well to your spouse and looking at each other with angst and disdain when you don't meet it. The next reason your financial goals don't stick is you're implementing them in a way that doesn't fit your current life stage. And I promise you, this will be the last example of food that I bring up because everything about financial goals is not budgeting. And I'm going to give you an example from investing that I think is often overlooked as well. But the most common, when I talk about things people are motivated to do financially being paying down debt, the most common way that they say they're going to do it, or the most common way they say they're going to budget or save more, is to stop eating out so much, or to stop shopping on Amazon is another one. And when I look at the people who say they want to do this, it will be a dual income couple or a single parent. They will have school-aged children, and they are truly telling themselves that it's highly likely that they are going to eat out less. And when they try, they will sit and they will try to make these elaborate meals because they'll tell themselves that if we're not going to eat out, we need to have a fancy meal that makes us feel like we're eating out. And that seems like a really good idea. And this brings to mind an experience that I had with a family member of mine who was trying to lose weight. And not only were they trying to lose weight, they were trying to radically change their behaviors, period, to the point that they took a sabbatical from work to get serious about their health. And I remember going to their apartment during this period where they had taken off work, and I went to this cousin's house around 8 o'clock on a Friday night, and they had found a recipe for cauliflower Alfredo. It was like whole wheat pasta, light cream sauce. It was a, quote unquote, healthier version of fettuccine Alfredo. And I watched as they prepped this food, and we talked and we hung out while they were getting this recipe together. And around 10:30, I realized that they still didn't have food on the plate. They didn't start eating this until about 11 o'clock. Now, this person and I like to talk, so part of it was just the social element of it. But as they were sitting down and we were talking about the work that they were trying to do, I asked them if they were, comfortable with me giving some feedback. And I shared, I know the goal is to eat better, and I know that this was an attempt to meet that objective. But if you think about it, this is something that took you 2.5, 3 hours to make. Is this something that once you go back to work, you can see yourself doing on a regular basis? If you get home from work at 6 o'clock after a long day, do you see yourself consistently cooking until 8:30 to get a meal on the table? And I encourage them, and I'm not a health guru, but I try to find some meals that they could get on the table from the time they opened the fridge to the time it was on their plate in 30 minutes, because that's something that's more attainable, and it wouldn't be an impediment to their stage of life. The same is true for goals even beyond things like eating out. Let's take investing. If I'm looking at the stage that I'm in life, and I know that I'm entering into the stock market for the first time, it's something that I have had a lot of hesitance about. It's something where I'm carrying trauma from my past about a fear that, if realized, would just drive me away from investing in total. So it really needs to go well this first time because I've finally prepared myself to take that step. But if I get in here and things go wrong, it's going to validate whatever fears I brought to this experience. When I see people start investing, one of the first places that they go is the S&P 500. Because they've been told that the S&P 500 is the most fail-safe investment that a person could possibly make. And all you need to do is put your money in the S&P 500, and over 30 years, it's going to beat any investment manager that you can find. So all you need to do is put your money in the S&P. And much of that is true. I do believe that if you put your money in the S&P 500 and you just set it and forget it for 30 years, and you compare the return in the S&P to what you get with your typical investment manager, the S&P 500 will have out-earned that investment manager. The lack of context, however, is what the journey looks like during that 30-year period. The S&P 500 can be a very volatile index for an investor who has no experience in the stock market. And if they had no concerns about what the journey looked like along the way, even if it was a very bumpy ride to the top, it wouldn't be much of a concern. But for an investor who is terrified of the stock market, their first experience dipping their toes into that water could be terrible. And it doesn't make someone long-term more comfortable with investing, because even though over time the amount may go up, they're logging in every day looking at when it goes down and cementing their fears of what they were trying to avoid in the first place. And then lastly, reasons your financial goals don't stick is that you don't know your why. There's no reason that you're giving for why you're doing these things. There's no North Star. You're setting a goal, and it possibly sounds like a great goal, and it may be a great goal, and you might have the right intentions, and you might have the right motivation. But as I've shared, motivation fades, habits don't. And when you have that motivation fade, one of the things that can convince you to continue with that habit is having an idea of why you're doing something. If I am looking at the way I structure my business, I need my North Star to be the fact that I have shared that in a certain period of time, I want to be able to work 9 months out of the year. Doesn't mean I'm taking 3 months off in a row, but just means if I'm looking at all the days that I took off, I want to have said that I took off 3 months per year. I want to be able to work when I want to work. Not saying I'm not going to work hard, but if I need to take off tomorrow because my son has an event at school, I don't want there to be any questions asked. Whatever I had on the schedule, that needs to get rescheduled. That's my North Star. If my family has something going on, I want to be able to say that work didn't prevent me from attending and being there and present. It's what keeps me not just aware of where I need to be headed, but it's also what gives me structure for how I set up my business. There's money that I have turned down because that money comes with a requirement of me spending more time. But there's also money that I've delayed where I could make more now one time, but I instead take less money now in exchange for recurring money down the line that works when I'm not working. And if you're setting your financial goals, you don't have to have my why, but you need to know that I'm saving not just because that's my goal for 2026, but because I want to be a homeowner. It's something that means a lot to me. And in order to be a homeowner, I have to save. You might be investing not just because it's the right thing to do, but because you want to be in a place where if your mother in her old age needs your financial support, you can give it to her. Maybe every single person in your family has struggled with debt for years, and you want to be the first person in your family who's debt-free. Whatever your why is, have that be your North Star, and make sure that the financial goals you set are connected to the journey to that North Star, and you'll be well on your way with financial goals that will actually stick, not these ones you set on January 1st that you probably have already given up on. I'll see you next week.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, this was the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen.